Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Zanotti, and welcome to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge. Well, it is a beautiful day out here. We are in Southern California. I think you've got good weather going on over there. We've got with us today Will Thallheimer. And Will, how are you today?
I am great, Rick. Glad to be here.
Good. Now, last time we met, you were working on the eLearning Manifesto and the serious eLearning Manifesto. How's that going?
It's gone great. We put it out there. It was Michael Allen, Clark Quinn, Julie Dirksen, and I who were sort of the instigators, although we had 33 trustees helping us out, and we put it out there. And our initial vision was, we'd put it out there and roll with it and see what happened. And we talked about it at a number of different conferences. We spoke about it. I wasn't there, but everybody else was there yesterday at the ASTD ICE conference, and apparently that went very well. I've spoken at the ISPI conference, and we talked about it at the eLearning Guild as well. And we want to thank all those sponsors, of course, for endorsing it and putting it out there. But in general, we've got a lot of positive response. It's very interesting. If you go to the website, you can see people would not only sign up, but they'll put a little statement in there on why they endorsed it. And it's really heartwarming to see so many people in the e-learning space who really want to do good work. And we're really gratified with that. I will tell you, we are working on a sort of next step. We sort of had this vision because we based this on the Agile Manifesto for software development, and those guys and gals, they put it up there, and it sort of went viral on its own. People have asked us to keep leading this, so we're now thinking about how to do that. Given our constraints that we're all sort of volunteers in doing it. But the response has been overwhelming, and we couldn't be happier at this point.
And it's good timing because the industry's a mess in so many different ways. There's low budgets, there's low capacity out there, or there's low ability only because people who really aren't normally doing this have been thrust into that role of, hey, guess what? You're not only an instructional designer, now you're the chief cook, bottle washer, you're going to be an audio editor, you're going to be a photo, video editor, you're going to be everything. And oh, by the way, you're also building all the e-learning. And people are struggling. And that's part of the issue.
Absolutely. I had an interesting thing happen a couple of years ago. I was asked to come in and give a workshop on e-learning. And I was giving it to trainers. And, it went really well. But at the very end, they turned to me and said, Will, we thought you were coming in here to bang us over the head and get us to do e-learning when we didn't want to do it. And we're really grateful, that you just sort of showed the benefits and you showed the limitations and you talked about it in a way that, made it make sense. So thank you for that. They were expecting had to be, sort of hogtied to do it. And, there is that resistance. Initially, people don't know what it is. They're sort of, and they've seen a lot of bad e-learning. So they're like, I don't want to be part of that. I know e-learning sucks. But yeah, it's an interesting field. There's brilliant e-learning out there.
There is.
Some of the best people are doing great things, like amazing things. But the great mass of e-learning is still in the dark ages. It's presenting too much content. It doesn't have the sort of instructional scaffolding that you need to make it, be effective.
Right. And one of the problems that we see a lot of is there's a lot of e-learning done by legal departments. In other words, you've got e-learning done by instructional designers, authors, whoever's doing it, But then the legal departments get a hold of it, and now it becomes page-turning verbiage, and a lot of
Yeah.
it. And it's not that they don't want to do good work. They sort of get derailed into the process of, we have to do bad work only because the legal department got involved. I see that a lot. Compliance is a big thing that everybody's doing out there, and they're awful. I mean, you can make fun compliance. We've actually seen a couple of good ones. We've even done a couple of good ones, but by and far, most of it's just awful, at least in the compliance world.
Absolutely. And actually, a couple of years ago, I was thinking, one of the problems in our industry is, there's certain things in our industry that push us to do some types of designs versus others. And one of the major forces is our legal departments. And it occurred to me, well, at some point, the legal department, they're trying to cover their ass, they're trying to do their job, which is good. But this will filter through the legal system, through the courts, where it will not, people will start losing cases if they try to base it on, well, we put it up there, we presented it to people. Well, that's not going to fly if the lawyers get smart, if they bring in learning experts, say, well, is presenting material sufficient
Right.
in creating good e-learning?
Yep.
And us learning experts are going to go, no, absolutely not. You cannot just present stuff.
Yeah.
And then, they're going to start winning cases, and then eventually it'll change. But right now, you're absolutely right. The legal profession is often pushing us to present content and particularly develop e-learning in a way that's very ineffective.
Right, because it's not really about training, it's about indemnification. And like you said, you made a really good point, which I hadn't heard before. Wait till the lawsuits really start happening and people proving, well, that's not really learning, that's not training. You just basically put out a piece of paper and somebody took it, but that doesn't mean they learned anything out of it.
Yeah.
So that's a real good point.
I have hope. I have hope that that'll change. So keeping my fingers crossed there.
Now, one of the things that you talk about, which is one of my I guess it's a pet peeve, if you will, and it's so important, is the concept of spacing. The concept of short chunks, learning bits for adult learning versus massive 1 to 3. I've seen the massive 1 to 3 hour nonstop courses with no bookmarking. So it's like, oh, you got to do it from the beginning again, and it's like, okay, now this is the Torquemada style of e-learning. It's torture. Why do we do that? What can people do to make that better?
Well, okay, so let me be clear about the research. And for the folks that don't know my work, that's what I do. I do a lot of translational research. So I look at the scientific journals on learning, memory, and instruction, and I try to pull out sort of the most critical recommendations. I sort of formalize this in the decisive dozen, the 12 most important learning factors, based on my work, my research. And one of them is the spacing effect. And the spacing effect is this finding. It's that if you repeat content and learning messages, if you repeat them all at once, they don't have much of an effect. But if you repeat them spaced over time, it's one of the things that's going to help people be able to remember. Oftentimes we think, well, we just present people, we help them learn, that's enough. Well, learning is not enough. People need to also be able to remember. And there's 3 things based on the research that will help people remember. One of them is spacing, repeating things spaced over time. The second thing is giving people retrieval practice, helping them retrieve information like they will have to do in their performance situations, in their work situations. And the third thing is making sure that the context in the learning situation is similar to that'll be in the performance situation. And the most simple way to think of that is we should simulate. Now, if we do those 3 things, we're going to help people remember. So this spacing effect, it sort of suggests something to us, or it should suggest something to us. And that is, well, maybe we don't need to present large chunks of content all, in an hour-long e-learning or a 90-minute or a 3-hour e-learning. What if we presented our learners with smaller bits of information, maybe less than 5 minutes, maybe less than 10 minutes, and space those over time. I've called this subscription learning. In fact, I think this is such an important concept and one that's been so overlooked that I put up a website, subscriptionlearning.com, to put this idea out there, to get people thinking about a new model of e-learning. A different way to do things. And, you know, I'm putting blog posts up there, but I'd love people's input as well. If you've seen, I've got a list of vendors and folks doing this stuff, but if you see other applications, I'd love people to get in contact with me and let me know what those are, because we really need to have a conversation about this.
Yeah, that's really important. If you look at the vendors like lynda.com, who put out a lot of content, mostly video content, but it's all done in probably 2 to 8 minute max segments, and they're tagged, and you can find, so if you're learning, let's say, Adobe Photoshop, and you have 50 lessons, those are all probably 5-minute lessons, and they're all tagged for how do I remove a background. So you search for remove background, and there's that one lesson, 5 minutes, and it gives you what you want in context because you're looking for it. And so I think they're a typical good example of short spaced lessons with a lot of repetition and a lot of hands-on, because you follow as you do or as they're doing it. And that seems to be pretty effective for a lot of people. Not everybody learns that way, but it's at least one approach. And of course, when you look at the e-learning tools, there's a lot of content on some of them too. And again, the options are there. Part of it, I think, is a problem with writing. A lot of people like to write a lot, and they write a lot in one big swoop versus let's break it up into smaller, more digestible pieces, like you said. And I think that makes a big difference, because people just learn a lot better with smaller chunks, especially adults. And I remember years ago, I was in my early 20s, and I taught English at Berlitz. It was a real interesting job. I was living overseas for 3 years. This was in Argentina. And I got hired right away because I was a native American speaker, and they wanted the American accent because most of the people traveled to the U.S. who were their clients. And their approach, I thought, worked, and it didn't. It was kind of a combination of both. They took the approach of visuals. You had a book in your hand, you pointed at visuals, and you said what it was. And then you kept doing that. It's sort of like Rosetta Stone. They do the similar approach. And it was effective for some people, not for all. For some, it was out of context. For some, it was perfect. But it was all short chunks. The classes weren't very long, probably 40 minutes, 45 minutes max, and a lot of repetition. And you kept going back and forth. You put out a concept, a couple of words, then you come back, and again, you're repeating. You're trying to add more to that concept. And they said that's how children learn language. I'm not really sure if that's exactly how we learn language, but I think it probably works very well for children. Adults, executives in their 40s and 50s struggled. It was an interesting kind of thing. They didn't quite get it as quickly as the younger ones, or even as probably kids would.
Well, yeah. I mean, learning a language is a very hard thing, right? So there's so much to learn. If you think about, if you had like a list of the learning objectives for a language, I mean, just think of all the, thousands, tens of thousands of content that you'd put up there. So you need the repetition, you need the spacing, you need the context. Probably they're using the pictures was a way to get it, sort of putting things in context a little bit. Of course, pictures aren't the only context. There's the words, etc. One of the subscription learning apps that I highlighted on the subscriptionlearning.com website is called Duolingo.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it won Apple's App of the Year last year, right? So it's definitely a subscription learning program, and my daughter uses it. And, we've tried to get her to keep up her Spanish. She learned when she was young, sort of lost it a little bit, and now is coming back to it. And she really likes this Duolingo. It's got, the context stuff. It's got realistic practice. It spaces it over time. It's also got gamification elements. Not gamification in the sense of, over the top kiddie kind of stuff, which really annoys me. But gamification to keep people interested. and it's really effective. And now she's reached a level where now she's doing like translations and stuff on there. It's really quite impressive. So yeah, I'd recommend people go take a look at Duolingo.
Now, you brought up gamification. This is something that it's the buzzword right now. Everything has to be a game or gamified, and it's. I think it's totally interesting, but not. I'm not that much into gamification. It has its place, but more often than not, and I've seen this a lot. People say we're going to put a game together with 50 questions. That's not a game. That's torture. Why are we doing this? And literally, it's 50 questions, and some of them are interesting, but 50 questions? That's really not a game. Right. And I think of games as things you see on a PS3 or on a tablet or something where there's a lot of engagement, there's a lot of action going on. Unless you're doing Myst or something, which is a different kind of engagement. But in e-learning, I haven't seen a ton of games, and I've heard many people say, if I see another Jeopardy game, I will shoot someone. Right. I've gotten that from clients. They go, can you build a game? Well, we can. What do you want? They go, anything but Jeopardy. Okay.
All right.
So
that's a pretty low bar, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, see, some people in our field, they oversimplify. So they hear the word gamification and they think, okay, we have to make it gamey or, and they use bright colors, sometimes kid colors. And it's really insulting to real e-learning users, right? If it's for kids, that makes sense to use kids colors, but for a workplace audience, it's not going to fly. So, there is some truth in the gamification stuff that we really need to pay attention to. So, keeping people motivated to pay attention, that's a good thing. So trying to figure out ways to do that. Sometimes gamification has a social aspect, so it brings in competition, and that can be good in some ways as long as you don't overdo it. There's a lot of good stuff that's in the gamification connotation, but we have to be careful not to dumb it down. And here again is where I believe we really ought to have a deep understanding of learning and cognition, because once we understand that, we know how the human mind works. We can take the best of things like gamification and design the best parts into our learning. I've seen people do, they have like, I saw once a program, an e-learning program, where they were trying to get customer service reps to talk better with people and to deal with them in a more efficient and more effective way. And then they slapped this silly game on top of it, and it just didn't work out. It's the same kind of thing that people do with immersive learning environments. Yep. They think, we'll make it immersive. Well, I've seen this in language learning, for instance. They made it immersive, but more than 50% of the learner time is walking around to find somebody else to talk to in this environment. It's just really a poor use of time. And if you really understood human learning, you wouldn't do it that way.
We did one course once. It was an immersive training course. That was actually a demo that we did for ASTD Tech Knowledge, and it got the attention of several large companies, and we wound up doing it for one of them. And it was funny because they loved the idea of being able to walk, and it wasn't one of those where you walked aimlessly. You had pretty much a limited area to walk in, but inside of every room there were, I guess you could call it gamification ideas of everything was active. You could click on pictures, you can click on windows, on doors, on tables, on books, and something would happen. Actually, we got the idea from an old game called Just Grandma and Me. It was the Critter series. And they were really cute. Our daughter was 2 years old, and I'm playing with her going, hey, I don't care if she likes it. I think it's fun. Because there was always something unexpected with the game. And so we tried that. And then when we started doing the course for real, it was so funny. HR got involved and said, no. They have to go through every single room in its entirety before they can move on. Why can't they come back to the room? No, they cannot. They have to go through it. And so this was rolled out. It was supposed to go to like 30,000 people. It went to 70 took it. 70 or 80. That was it. It had no one taking it. Then it finally went up to like 300. But that was over, 4 or 5 years. Nobody liked it. Right. Because it went from interesting, fun, you're actually learning on your own and you're investigating, to now you've got to do it. The next button will not come on until you've seen every object in this room. Well, there's 20 objects in the room. No, everyone has to be seen. Okay, then it's not going to work. No, we don't care. That's how we want it. It didn't work. And so, of course, as in most cases, we got blamed. So it's like,
well, you're raising a really good
yeah.
Point about how sometimes we, the learning designers, we know how to do this stuff right.
Yeah.
But we are sort of captured or under the influence of many other stakeholders who really don't know.
Right.
And, that's one of the things that's really interesting in our field is how do those of us who are learning leaders or who are vendors, how do we make sure that we are educating our stakeholders and we are enabled, that we get the resources and the permission to do the things that are the right things to do. And I've been doing my research to practice stuff at Work Learning Research for like 16 years now. And it's one of the constant themes that I hear is that, Will, we in my top team, we know what to do. Now we get resistance from the organization. We get resistance from some of our training folks, some of our instructional designers, but for the most part, we know what to do, but we're sort of stuck in doing it. And I actually have, after hearing years of frustration, I came up with this idea about stealth messaging, which your viewers might be interested in. So the concept is this: stealth messages. So we in the instructional design field, we think we're pretty good about making arguments and creating, and sort of tapping into people's rational thinking. But clearly, how well is that working for us? We clearly talk about, well, we need to educate our stakeholders. We can't do the things we want to do. And we've tried to educate, but we've really failed at that. So the idea is this, and it's really based on sort of human cognition. Human beings are sometimes proactive and sometimes focused on, there's a sort of rational channel, a conscious channel, and we use that. But it's not the only channel. We also have a subconscious channel, and the advantage of that is that it doesn't get filtered out. So when we try to make arguments to folks, they're filtering it out, they're listening to it based on their view of the world, and since they don't know learning, they don't have really the correct view of the world, or they don't understand our view of the world. And so what we should maybe think about doing is tapping into sort of this subconscious processes. Well, how do we do that? Well, we do a lot of things that are our standard operating procedures. We review our courses from time to time to look at them. We recruit training and people, instructional designers. We evaluate. We hand out year-end reports. We do a number of these things. What if, when we're doing these things, if we could send stealth messages through the sort of subconscious cognitive channel to help surreptitiously educate folks? So here's an example. When we recruit a trainer, we often bring them in and we have them demonstrate their platform skills, see how good they're going to be in the classroom. Mm-hmm. But if we want them to also take on a consultative role, what if we ask them also to demonstrate their consultative skills when we bring them in, when we're recruiting them? When we did that, we'd not only send a message to them about what we cared about, but we'd send a message internally to ourselves that consultative skills are important. I just finished writing a book on what I'm calling the performance-focused smile sheet. And it's not going to be out till the end of the year. Don't go to Amazon yet. But the idea there is that what if we redesigned our smile sheet to be more effective, to focus on not just what happens in the classroom, but what happens later, to have more of a performance focus. If we designed it this way, we could perhaps send stealth messages to our stakeholders, our internal stakeholders in our organization, but also to ourselves, to our own workplace learning staffs, to really push the idea that it's not just about what happens in the classroom. This notion of stealth messaging, I've sort of floated this out. I've talked about this with learning leaders, and it's really resonating. So I'm kind of excited about it. If people want to go to the website and look for, I think I call it Chapter 41, they can download a chapter on that very thing.
That's great. Now, how similar is that to, let's say, neuro-linguistic programming, where, again, there's subtleties in either verbiage or in actions that cause people to react or do certain things?
Well, it is one of the fundamental aspects of cognition that we are reactive, right? In fact, that's why the context alignment works. The notion that when we design learning, we should have some of the same cues that are in the workplace situation in the learning situation. So that's why we simulate. And how that works is when people go back to their workplace, when they notice cues, and it could be a subconscious triggering, when they notice cues in that environment, they will be reminded automatically. I call it spontaneous remembering, that the cues will spontaneously remind them of what they learned. Only, though, if we design our learning in that kind of method.
Right.
So, this is, this sort of cognitive triggering, it's one of the fundamental architects of human cognition, and it's something we ought to use. There's this other interesting research, the researchers call it on implementation intentions. But they find, people might have a goal to do something. And, they might, I'll just throw out an example, they might be successful in attaining their goal 30%, right? So, for example, I want to live more healthfully, or I want to lose weight. Well, that's a goal that I have. Well, what the researchers have found, that's not as effective as having a goal plus using cues to trigger yourself. So let's say that I'm trying to lose weight. So I could say, I want to lose weight. But if I set up some triggers, so for example, I set up a trigger, say, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, when I wake up in the morning, I will go for a 30-minute run. That kind of trigger, wake up Monday morning, I better do this. Or if I want to buy organic food, right? Well, what's the trigger I should set for that? Well, maybe the trigger is on my shopping list, I'll write organic food on there. Or when I'm imagining myself in the produce aisle, that I'm going to look for the organic fruit and vegetables. By setting up that trigger, not just having a goal, I want to buy organic fruit, I want to buy organic produce, but I will, when I'm in the produce aisle, I will think about buying organic. That kind of mental triggering has been shown, and the research is really kind of stunning on this, to create an effect that's likely to double people's compliance. So that if you are likely to do it 30% of the time with triggers, with implementation intentions, you're going to do it 60% of the time. So this is a fundamental aspect of human cognition, and we in the learning space should be using this to our advantage.
So in essence, changing behaviors, creating habits, better habits, and again, ultimately, it's all about context, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if we don't relate to something, I guess we don't really do it. Which is funny, that kind of brings back the idea, and we've only got about 5-6 minutes left, but brings back the idea of school. We go through the whole school system, and I'm convinced the school system is geared to teach you not to learn, not to enjoy learning new things, and being enthralled with something. It's boring for most kids. There's the teachers either don't know how to teach well, or the subjects are by nature boring, and when they're not put in context, for example, mathematics. A lot of math is not ever taught in context, so nobody knows why they're learning it. And as a result, they don't like something that's actually pretty cool.
You're absolutely right. And I've got an 11-year-old daughter, and she just took our state test yesterday on mathematics. And her response was, I said, well, how'd you like it? Well, I didn't like it. Yeah. And she used to love these tests because she's really a focused kid. And, she used to love these, see these as a challenge. So I was like stunned. I go, well, what do you mean you didn't like it? Well, it was boring. It was too easy. I go, oh, okay,
Easy.
now I get it.
Interesting. There's no challenge.
There's no challenge. Right, right.
Interesting.
And she has, the Khan Academy has, been working on their website and their interactions and has really created a very nice environment for learning. And my daughter now goes on there. And at first she resisted. Well, but now she's really into it. And, we sort of push her as parents. We say, well, you have to do 30 minutes a week or whatever. And now she's into it and she likes it and she, likes the challenges. And they've added some gamification elements too, not over the top, but just enough to keep her interested. Wow, Daddy, I earned this today, or I'm at this level. And she gets very excited and she's learning more. And the good news is she's learning more and learning it deeply. The bad news is now the regular school stuff is really boring.
Isn't that interesting? And you're right. Khan Academy is fun. It's interesting. And I remember I took some of their classes just to see how it felt. And I enjoyed math. I thought it was actually interesting the way he taught it. And I kept thinking, how the heck are they doing this? How are they writing on that board like that? So I was interested in the tech. That got me going too. But it's a real good way to teach. And the results I've read for schools that are implementing it themselves have been excellent. I think one of the things he said is the kids who usually don't do well are doing better than ever, and the ones who did well are struggling with it because now they need help. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and what they've done recently is they've added a lot of instructional supports that we, in the instructional design field, we know about. They're giving them real-world practice. They're giving them feedback. There is the content presentation, which is where Mr. Khan got started, but now they've added a lot of, research-based, research-aligned interactions that really do support the learning. So it's good stuff. And that's we started out this conversation being depressed about the industry, but there are institutions out there that are doing great stuff, and we need to figure out who they are and highlight them. And I know you do that on your show, and I think it's great. So
that we try it, and we are at the end of our time. But are you going to be talking anywhere? Any shows you're doing? I know you got a book coming out, and can we pre-order it? That's another good question.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Still early in the process.
Okay.
It's a funny story. I've been working on a big book for like 17 years, and it's still not done. So I finally decided, well, I have to start just writing smaller books to get them out there. So hopefully, we'll see how this one goes. I am going to be speaking in June at the ICELW conference. Okay. It's the International Conference on eLearning in the Workplace. And I'm going to be talking about the serious eLearning Manifesto there. Yeah. I keynoted there last year, and this year I just wanted to go there and talk about the manifesto. I just had a great experience talking about the manifesto at ISPI, and it's really resonating with people, particularly resonating with people who want to do good work, who want to use it as a way to educate their stakeholders, to just help the whole field rise up to a better level of e-learning. So that's the next stop on my conference speaking thing. I think I could, sometimes I forget things, but
yeah, well, that sounds good. When can we get you back? Love to have you back again.
Oh, it's great to be here, and I was previewing your shows, just to remind myself, and you got a great lineup, so it's an honor to be.
It's a lot of fun.
Among this.
It's a lot of fun, and when we get people like you, it makes it even more fun. So,
wow, thank you very much.
We appreciate that, and Will, again, thanks for coming today, and I was very informal with you today. Will is also Dr. Will Thallheimer. So and by the way, what is your doctorate in?
It's officially Educational Psychology, Human Learning, and Cognition.
That's a good one. That's a very good one.
It's a mouthful, but
it's amazing. I know people who are psychiatrists, and I know other people who are psychiatrists who do different things. And for example, they do brain scanning before they give any prescriptions out, because they said if you don't understand what the brain's actually doing from a neurological and neurochemical point of view, how can you actually help someone? Yeah. And it's true. Yeah. If you don't understand cognition and everything else, how do you know how people learn? That's really key.
I couldn't be more in agreement with you. You know, it's done a lot for me. You know,
Yeah.
I am asked to look at learning interventions all the time, and because of all that background in the schooling I
Hmm.
got, I'm able to see things that,
Yeah.
you know, not everybody sees. So
Yeah, that's cool. That's
yeah, it's
great.
good. It's good.
Well, anyway, we'll appreciate it again. And if you want to get a hold of Will, we will put out his websites in the show notes later on when we're up on Vimeo, so you can have links to his site and everything else. And we'll have a great one, and we'll see you next time. And for all you guys in the chat room and or watching the recording, thanks for being there. And please subscribe. Give us your feedback. We like hearing from you. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks, Will. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rick. Good to be here.